The movie we're going to talk about today is A Bug's Life. But before I do that, I want to talk about two things. The first is Soul. I just watched it and it's amazing. The animation, visuals, story, it's just great. Truly a return to form for Pixar after a few missteps from the recent movies. Secondly, I want to talk about the context of the release of A Bug's Life. This is the third feature-length computer animated film. The second was Ants from DreamWorks. I wanted to say that this movie might have been a bit rushed into production once Pixar found out that DreamWorks was working on a similar film. Now, this was not one of those coincidences where a bunch of similar movies come out at once. DreamWorks knew about the production of A Bug's Life, as John Lasseter shared the details with Ratzenberger, who had since left Pixar to form his own studio known as DreamWorks, who are from Shrek fame. They then put Ants into production, and Pixar created A Bug's Life shortly thereafter, after realizing that Ants was being made. Just a little context, now back to the main video. A Bug's Life is another one of those movies I would watch constantly as a child. Something about the world that Pixar created really entranced me. With that being said, upon revisiting it all these years later, I can see why it didn't resonate with me as long as movies like Toy Story 1 or even 2 did. Don't get me wrong, it's not bad. It just isn't that memorable in all honesty. Let's get into the recap before I express more of my thoughts. A Bug's Life stars Dave Foley as Flick, Julia Louis-Dreyfus as Princess Ada, Phil Stiller as the Queen, Hayden Panettiere as Dot, Richard Kind as Molt, Joe Ranft as everyone's favorite beautiful butterfly, Dennis Leary as Gwen's mother person, John Ratzenberger as Pixar role number 2, and sexual assaulter as Hopper. An honorable mention is Ashley Tisdale too. I really couldn't come up with a great segue from the last guy. A Bug's Life opens with some ants collecting food for some sort of offering. We see Flick for the first time as an inventor type, where he nearly kills his love interest, Princess Ada. We learn the offering is for the grasshoppers, who are generally a menace to the ants, but use the offering as a trade for some kind of protection on the island that they live away from birds and other bugs for protection. We hear the grasshoppers coming by way of a snail's carcass horn. All the ants run to throw their offering in the pile, and Flick finally throws his, but in doing so, throws his machine in as well, which tips the offering to some water below. This causes the grasshoppers to break into the anthill to ask what the hell, and be pretty damn mean to everybody. Hopper, the main villain, and leader of the grasshoppers, nearly murder a child, and Flick tries to stand up to him, foreshadowing, but does not in the end. Hopper then demands they give them double the original offering, and then they leave. So the colony is kind of basically screwed. The leaders of the colony then convene on what to do about Flick for basically screwing them over, and they decide to send him away to find warrior bugs as a ploy to get him away so that they can gather food. Flick leaves to the city and stumbles upon a failed circus act that he doesn't know is a circus act, which he then hires them as they mistake him for a talent scout. He brings them home and all the ants are super excited and like giving them crap and stuff. Then the circus troupe finds out that Flick wasn't really a talent scout. They try to leave, but Flick asks for more time so that they can come up with a plan after they save the queen's other daughter, Dot, from being eaten by a bird. The princess then plants the idea of Hopper being afraid of birds into Flick's mind. Flick then creates a plan to make up fake birds to scare the grasshoppers away. They create the bird. The circus decides to stay because they grew to like the colony, and the night the grasshoppers are supposed to return, the circus act's boss comes to take them back. This creates a problem, obviously, because the colony still hasn't figured out that these bugs aren't warriors, and then they send Flick away with them because he lied. Afterwards, the grasshoppers come, and Dot gets away to convince Flick to come back after giving him a rock. All the bugs come back after doing some minor Grand Theft Auto boxo, and they spring into action with the bird. First, they distract the grasshoppers with the circus, then they put the bird into action with a bunch of little kindergartners, children. While it goes well for a while, the grasshoppers eventually catch on because Circus Act's boss sets it on fire. Hopper then flicks Flick's ass, and Flick inspires the ants to revolt against the grasshopper overlords during this great speech that he gives. And then Hopper tries to kill Flick to quell the rebellion. Flick then leads Hopper to a real bird with the help of the princess, and the bird, it feeds Hopper to its 3 children while he screams in agony. This was one of my favorite movies as a child, people. So generally a happy ending. The circus leaves after, but promises to come back, and Flick gets the girl. And the end. As I said before, this movie's not my favorite anymore. It has some weird issues, and I just have a few problems with it. The story isn't the strongest, but it's fine. I think all the ants are just really big assholes to Flick, really. Most of his inventions work, and the accidents that happen are literally just that, accidents. Most of his inventions could probably benefit the colony, but all the old ants are like afraid of progress or something. Anyway, I think Hopper isn't all that of an interesting villain either. His motivations are pretty clear, as he wants to keep the ants down in a place below him. However, it's not really clear as in why he wants to do it. There's obviously other places the grasshoppers can go without needing to bully the ants for food, really. Like I said before, the ants are confined to their own little island. They don't really care about anybody else. I mean, they go to like Bug Cancun in the movie and all hang out and have a good time, so I'm not sure why they needed to go back to the ants. Hopper gives this whole speech about keeping the ants down underneath them, or else they'll revolt against the grasshoppers. But if the grasshoppers stay where they are, or go to where I assume they normally live, because it seems like they have enough food to sustain themselves, then they wouldn't need to worry about the ants rising up against them. And Hopper would still be alive. It's not sensible, and the other grasshoppers know it too. They express it. There's also this scene that's really bugs me where Princess Ada's trying to like apologize to Flick, but it's like a backhanded apology, because she's like, I haven't been so nice to you. And it's like, yeah, no, shit. You tried to get him killed practically. It's just awkward, and even John Lasseter, when they were making the film in an interview, he said that they didn't really know what to put there. Like I said before, this colony doesn't really deserve Flick, honestly, as well. Honestly, the good news is that the animation is actually pretty good, holds up pretty well. Water physics in it are pretty cool, and the City of Bugs is honestly really interesting to look at. The character design is mostly original and unique, except for the ants. My first issue with the movie is how little variance in the ants there are. You can easily identify the main characters, and I get limitations at the time. But if DreamWorks can make some uncanny valley looking ants that look like Sylvester Stallone, then I think there could have been a little bit more variance in some of the ants, other than just the main characters. There's some weird things here and there, but it's not overly egregious, and I always like to see the jumps in animation quality between the movies. This one just has some more fluid movements, really good water, no humans to be scared of either, so that's also a plus. The music's okay. It gives off heavy Toy Story vibes as Randy Newman is back as the composer. There's kind of one big difference between Toy Story and A Bug's Life, and for most it's that you won't recognize most of the songs from A Bug's Life. From listening to the score independently of the movie, it's about the same quality as Toy Story, honestly, and the flick machine is amazing. But overall, A Time of Your Life isn't as memorable as You Got a Friend in Me, and overall the soundtrack isn't as memorable as Toy Story's. I'm not really sure if it's because the movie isn't as well put together as Toy Story, or if it's because it's a weaker soundtrack, but I think I'm gonna lean more into the first rather than it being a weaker soundtrack. As a way to sort of cap off these videos now, I wanted to start 3 little sections with this movie, looking for things like the Pizza Planet truck, which is in every Pixar film, A113, which is a classroom number at Cal Arts that every original Pixar animator would go to class to prior, and the existential theme of this movie, because every Pixar film has one, let's be honest. So the first Pizza Planet truck is this one right outside of the trailer that they cut to a couple times in A Bug's Life. Also, it's the trailer you see in Monsters Inc. where Randall gets destroyed by a newspaper, so double trivia today. A113 is seen when Flick first enters the city on a box right behind him to the left. And finally, the existential dread this delightful children's movie instilled in me was being afraid of not being accepted by one's own peers. So again, nothing but happiness over here in this corner. Honestly, this movie was very hard for me to run with. I expected a lot more, especially as a follow-up to Toy Story, but a lot of things were working against this film from the beginning. All in all, while it's not my least favorite, it's nowhere near the top. It's firmly placed below Toy Story, probably at about a C tier, whereas Toy Story is about B tier, but high B tier. Honestly, A Bug's Life is probably between C and D more like. And I used to love this movie, so that makes it really hard to place it here. It really is one of those things where you're hyped up in your mind about it, and you like show it to your friends and you're just like, I swear this was better in my head. As a number, I have to give A Bug's Life about a 5.7 out of 10 for not quite living up to the high bar Toy Story had set. Remember, honestly, I'm looking at this from a whole with future knowledge of newer movies, so these movies can be shifted downward and upward as we see better and worse films from Pixar. And we do see worse films, trust me. The next movie, honestly, Zurg is your father, but Stinky Pete might as well just be your daddy. Goodbye.